Okay, so we all know the story of Dr. Faust, right? The brilliant guy who sells his soul to the devil. But here's something you probably don't know. That story has a sequel, a forgotten sequel, actually, and it tells us exactly what happened after the devil came to collect his due.
Right, so let's just recap the original ending. We're talking about the 1587 Faust book. It ends, well, about as dramatically as you can imagine. Faust's 24 years are up, Mephistopheles shows up, and Faust's end is just gruesome. His soul gets dragged screaming down to hell. Talk about a definitive ending, right? Case closed. Or so you'd think.
But that's where things get really interesting. I mean, think about it. Faust is gone, sure, but what about all that stuff he left behind? All that dangerous forbidden knowledge, the temptation itself. Does that kind of evil just, poof, disappear when one guy gets his comeuppance? Well, the answer to that is a big, fat no.
And that's exactly what people were wondering back then, too. So just a few years later, in 1593, someone wrote a sequel to answer that very question. It's called the Christoph Wagner Chronicle, and it picks up literally right after Faust's Damnation, right in the thick of it.
So this new book does something really clever. It moves the camera, away from the legendary Dr. Faust and onto a new guy, his servant, his apprentice, a fellow named Christoph Wagner. And that's such a great move because it poses this incredible question. What happens when the student has to choose? Do I follow my master down that same damned path?
Okay, so how does this whole thing kick off? Well, it all starts with Faust's will, so to speak. And yeah, as you can probably guess, he didn't exactly leave behind a summer home and a stock portfolio.
So with Faust out of the picture, his servant Wagner suddenly has access to everything. We're talking the whole shebang, the forbidden books, the magical gear, all the occult paraphernalia that gave Faust his power in the first place. The keys to the kingdom, or the keys to damnation, are now literally in his hands.
And here's the thing that's so wild. Wagner is no innocent. He had a front row seat to the whole disaster. He saw firsthand the gruesome, horrifying price Faust paid. He witnessed the damnation. And still, faced with the biggest red flag in history, he makes a conscious choice. He doesn't run away. He decides to copy his master.
And this is the absolute core of the sequel. The whole point is that Wagner is basically a lesser Faust. See, Faust, for all his massive flaws, was driven by this huge, tragic, philosophical need for absolute knowledge. He wanted to understand everything. Wagner? He's got all the dangerous ambition, but none of that deep philosophical drive. He's an imitation, a knockoff, almost a parody of the real thing.
So, he's decided to go for it. He's going to walk the same path as Faust. And he knows what step one is. He needs to get his own demon. He's got to make a deal.
So he cracks open those inherited books, does the whole magic circle thing, and it works. He successfully summons his very own demon, a spirit by the name of Oerhan. And just like that, he's repeated the biggest, most important sin of his master. He's actively gone looking for a deal with hell.
But, and this is hilarious, just look at the difference between the two deals. Faust gets Mephistopheles, right? This cunning, powerful, almost intellectual demon. Wagner gets Oerhan, a demon who shows up as a monkey or maybe a big bird. This isn't some partner for a grand cosmic debate. This is a demonic butler for a guy who wants to do magic tricks. It's a second-rate pact for a second-rate Faust. It just fits perfectly.
All right, so the deal is done. His soul is on the line, and he's got his demon monkey sidekick. What does Wagner actually do with all this power? Well, let's just say his grand tour looks a little different from his master's.
His whole story is basically a series of random adventures. Yeah, he travels around to places like the Orient and Africa, but the magic he's doing is, well, it's pretty mundane. He's performing tricks for people, getting into arguments at universities, basically using his powers for practical stuff or just for entertainment. He's definitely not trying to, unravel the secrets of the cosmos like Faust was.
And because of this, the whole tone of the book is completely different. The original Faust is this dark, heavy, philosophical tragedy. The Wagner Chronicle, on the other hand, is packed with humor and satire. The sources even call it low comedy. It's way less about the deep, soul-crushing terror of damnation and way more about the funny, kind of absurd adventures of this guy who is clearly in way over his head.
But don't get me wrong, the comedy is just the surface. This book was written with a very, very serious point to make. Underneath all those satirical adventures, there's a really stark and honestly pretty chilling moral lesson.
And what is that lesson? It's all about the persistence of evil. The author is basically screaming at us saying, hey,
Just because Faust is gone doesn't mean the problem is solved. The temptation for forbidden knowledge, that lust for power, that stuff doesn't go away. It's always there, just waiting for the next curious person to come along and pick up the book. And by having the servant fall in the exact same way as the master, the story makes a really powerful point. It's saying Faust wasn't some one-off special case. He was a pattern, an example. His downfall is a warning that this cycle of temptation and damnation is a threat to everybody, not just some once-in-a-generation genius.
And trust me, the author isn't subtle about this. The book is, and I love this phrase from the source material, larded with religious warnings. It's basically a textbook on what not to do. It's constantly hammering home this very strong, very orthodox Christian message about the terrible consequences of straying from the path. So, for the audience back in the 1500s, the takeaway was meant to be crystal clear. This wasn't a story for debate or nuance. The message was an ironclad rule. If you mess with the occult to get power and knowledge, there is only one possible ending for you: eternal damnation, period. No loopholes, no second chances.
And that leaves us with a really unsettling final thought, doesn't it? The story of Christoph Wagner suggests that temptation isn't just something you choose. It's something you can inherit, like a cursed family heirloom. It's an inheritance of sin. So that really begs the question, if the tools of our own destruction can just be left lying around for the next person to find, who is truly immune?